it can sometimes bring immense suffering. I recently read about the the person, I can't remember his name now. It was just such a crazy story. It's one of the good things about Facebook is that if you sometimes go on there, like 90% of the time, you know, your wall is just a bunch of nonsense. But every now and again, there's something that slips in there. It's very interesting. So I saw this article about a guy. He was the man who came up with leaded fuel.
Oh my God.
So at a certain point when they first started making cars, they had a huge problem with cars because the engines didn't last long. Like it was very rough. They broke a whole time. Imagine this, the first rudimentary car engines, and they had a lot of maintenance issues. So cars would break very regularly. They'd need regular maintenance, and they couldn't really figure out what was happening. And this guy wanted to solve that problem. He wanted to make the world a better place. He wanted to bring more quote unquote happiness to the world. Isn't it? Is there? Well, there's a lot of bad things in the world, but one of them is taking your car to the repair shop. I don't know if you've ever done that in New York. You guys, mostly if you live in New York, you're blessed that you don't really need to have a car. But it's one of those things, it's not pleasant. And so he found out that if you add lead to fuel, it had an amazing effect on a car. It made the whole combustion process and the whole process of running a car, it smoothed a lot of the edges. It allows cars to last much longer. It reduced the amount of maintenance that you need. And it was a miracle. It was like everybody was so happy, especially the people who sell lead. They were it was a great discovery. So he made leaded fuel and it was just amazing. It was an amazing thing. And then about, I don't know how long afterwards, I think that's a long time, maybe 30, 40 years later, they realized it was a horrible thing. It was horrible. It caused poisoned all of us, caused so much, if you would think about the cancer rates, how much of the rising cancer rates could be attributed to leaded fuel. You think about the billions of cars that are running in the world, burning fuel with lead and then just having lead go into the atmosphere. So it was really not worth it. And even now, if you go to the gas station, you'll see there's specifically unleaded fuel. So
ADHD.
yeah. So much ADHD, like the cognitive, especially for children, the effect of children being exposed to lead, because it ends up in their brain and has like so much. That's why even in New York, if you oftentimes are selling houses, there's strict laws on lead paint. Like if you have paint, there's lead in it. If you know about it, you have to, your realtor has to know about it. It's a big thing, because if children get lead, it's disastrous. So this same gentleman, I don't know if he felt bad about it, but he was not dissuaded by his attempt to make the world a better place. Because he went on to invent another wonderful thing. He invented CFCs, which is the thing you use to cool down in refrigerators. It's an essential component in allowing electricity to be converted into something that produces coolness. And again, wow, wonderful. It was his redeeming invention, isn't it? It's like the guy who came up with unleaded fuel was pretty bad, but at least he made up for it, and he helped us create the refrigerator. And then, unfortunately, a few years later, we found out that all the CFCs are creating a hole in the ozone layer, and it's basically it's going to cause the whole planet to burst up into flames at some point. And now there was a huge thing to try to clean up the CFC, so much legislation they had to pass throughout the world to try to stop the production of CFC. It was a big issue. But this gentleman was not discouraged. And at the end, he actually died because he made some invention at the end of his life when he was getting older. He made some weird pulley contraption in his house that allowed him to get stuff and sort of be more mobile. And at the end, he actually got caught up in his own machine and he got suffocated. He got caught up in the pulleys and whatever, and he died like that. So, very interesting. The point of the story is, now I don't know this gentleman. I don't know. I don't think he was evil. I don't think he set out to destroy, to cause, cancer. I don't think he was some evil genius mastermind that had some plan to destroy the ozone layer. I think he probably even maybe had good intentions. He had good intentions. He probably worked hard. I'm sure he had a good work ethic, really applied himself to his work. But the result was not what he thinks, is not what he thought. So that is the danger of this world we live in, is that, as they say, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Unfortunately, intentions or desire, if not guided by proper understanding, will not bring you to where you want to be. And that's something we have to really make peace with. Intentions is not enough. Intentions is not enough. And oftentimes things that are done with the best of intentions can, as we see, have disastrous consequences. Whether this example is very big, but even in our own life. How many times have we done stuff like that? You see it also, some of the most obvious examples is when you end up in the wrong relationship, isn't it? Why do we end up in relationships with other people? Because we have some idea that, well, it will make us happier. Like if I'm with this other person, I will have more happiness with this person than I will have by myself. But how many times, I remember once as a monk, when I was still at some point when I was wearing orange, and we would go on the streets and meet people and sell books. And I met this one guy, this is in South Africa, and I met him, and I told him, we're monks, and we're distributing Bhagavad Gita books. And the guy, when he heard I was a monk, he got so excited. And he just told me that he thinks that what I'm doing with my life is the best thing ever. He said, because he has just came from the courthouse, and it was the most horrible divorce that he had ever gone. And the guy told me basically for a half an hour, he just told me about how the hell he's been through the last 10 years and like how he's lost everything. And like for the half an hour, I was just standing there, and he was basically just telling me that you should stay a monk. He's like, it was like telling me, like he was telling me. I was like, I felt that I had to give him a donation. And so this guy, at some point, he entered into that relationship, and he was thinking, hey, this is the person. This person will make me happy. And then 10 years later, or however many years later, it was one of the most, for him, it was a horrible experience. Now, I'm not saying he's innocent. I mean, actually, if I think about, he was probably, I don't know, who was the problem? That guy looked pretty difficult. But the point is that he, at the end, same situation. He thought, this will make me happy, and he went for it, and it is not the result that he got. So, in trying to understand happiness then, if we look at it philosophically, quite a few different schools. It's always interesting if we go back to the ancient Greeks, because a lot of the words we have today, they have their origin in a lot of those schools of philosophy. For example, we have the word hedonism. So hedonism, what does hedonism mean? Anyone?
He's overindulgent in pleasure. You live for that.
Yes, okay. So we would say, what does a hedonist think about happiness? If you add a hedonist, if you ask a hedonist, what do you think is happiness? What would a hedonist say?
Pleasure.
Pleasure. And what kind of pleasure?
Any kind of.
Just like sensual pleasure. Sensual pleasure,
Right.
okay. So the hedonist, now it's very interesting today, when we think about hedonists, we think about people who have orgies and take a lot of drugs and stuff. But the actual original hedonists, they were pretty refined. They had this idea of, they spoke about a concept of eudaimonia. And the idea is where the whole goal is to make your mind and senses satisfied. And like it was like not crazy, sort of crazy life. It was this idea, but the principle was still that happiness means satisfaction of the senses. And that's what happiness is. And you have to strive to somehow build your life in such a way that your senses can become satisfied. And what does senses mean? Oh, it means the things. Eating, your sexual desire, your desire for comfort, for health, all these things. Basically means the body and the senses. If those things are happy, then you're happy. That's happiness. Okay? And there's something to that, especially if you have a toothache, and then you become oftentimes much more convinced that real happiness is just not having any physical pain. And that it's amazing how there is some appeal to making your concept of happiness as simple as just saying that happiness is pleasure, and making that your pursuit in life. But we know that if you think about it a little bit and you scratch through the surface, it falls apart pretty quickly. What is one of the main things that the problem with the philosophy of hedonism that if you think about it philosophically, it doesn't hold. Let's think about what are some of the issues that come with that. I mean, who would here consider themselves a hedonist? Who thinks that the highest goal in life is simply having pleasure for the senses? That is the highest goal in life. Any hedonists here today? Probably not, because we don't generally, hedonists is not generally the kind of people that would come to a Krishna temple. But they have other things to do on a Sunday evening.
I'm a recovering hedonist.
A recovering hedonist, yeah, that's a very good. Who is a recovering hedonist? Then I think, yeah, okay, we have a lot of people here. So what happened? Okay, at some point you pursued hedonism. Then you don't have to get into the details, but what happened? Why did that philosophy not work? Why?
I'm not sure.
Huh? You're not sure. Interesting. Okay.
I wasn't happy.
You wasn't happy? Yeah.
I mean,
Okay, that's a simple one. If you actually go for it, how many hedonists end up happy? It's a good question. Like who are some of the famous hedonists in the world? If you go look at them, and then there's people who really push the boundaries very far, and then you ask yourself, well, did it work for them? Okay. Philosophically, what are some of the problems with hedonism that come up?
Well, if you live for gratification of the senses, that's what it really is.
Yeah.
Gratification of the senses.
Yes. Yeah.
So obviously you're missing out on connecting with any form of spiritual dimension.
Yes.
Creation itself, which is beyond all that.
100%. Very important point. The philosophy of hedonism doesn't account for the vast suffering that we willingly inflict upon ourselves for some other kind of purpose. If you're a hedonist, think about it this way. What about having children? Like my wife is pregnant now. She's 4 months pregnant. And it's the first time that I can really understand what it really means to have a child. You always think about, it's uncomfortable. But just to see the first 3 months is basically nauseous the whole time. And then it's like your body is undergoing these vast changes. There's obviously a lot of stress. Because if you're pregnant, you know how many things, it's one of the things you don't think about. How many things can go wrong if you're pregnant? Like so many things can go wrong. Like so many weird things, and then this can happen, that can happen. But somehow people do it. And many people, they will say it's one of the best things they did. Many people are happy that they did it. Even though, what to speak about once the child enters the world, but I don't know if you have thought about how much suffering you caused your parents as you were growing up, all the crazy things you did, and all the things, all the things kids get up to, so much stress, so much anxiety with children. So the problem is that there's a lot of things we do in life that actually causes a lot of suffering, that brings a lot of displeasurable things for the mind and for the senses, but we willingly do those things. Recently I went to a talk about, because I live out in Long Island, and then at the library there was some talk, and some person was speaking about the Culper spy ring. Have you ever heard about them? The spies in the Revolutionary War. There's a bunch of people on Long Island who were spying for George Washington, and how they would get the info, and they shipped it by a boat over the Connecticut Sound. And then one of the spies, the early spies, they caught him, and they sentenced him to hanging. It was very interesting how in those times, if you would catch a soldier, if the people were dressed in uniform, you couldn't just execute people. They had to become prisoners, prisoner of war, and they had to be, there was a certain etiquette with how you had to handle prisoners of war. But if for some reason you catch a soldier in civilian clothes behind enemy lines, then he is considered a spy. Then he does not get any of the protections that soldiers get. And they would just hang them immediately as spies. So this man, he was on a spy mission, they caught him, they sentenced him to hanging, and in his famous last words, he said when they hanged him, last words, he says that, and it was like no regrets that he was going to hang the country. So the point being that for this man, there was something much higher. There's nothing pleasurable getting hanged. But for him, that was not at all what he was thinking about. His interest was way beyond thinking just about his own material body and life and happiness. So, like you said, the problem with hedonism is it doesn't account for the many things that are meaningful in life that bring us suffering, that actually make life more difficult and more complicated. So hedonism, whether you try to live it practically, it falls apart very quickly. Yeah? Like, because the problem is also naturally with suffering or with pleasure, is that any pleasure usually is connected with pain, 100%. It's those things just completely go together. If you like, I had my first monastic mentor. He always had this line, because at the Hare Krishna temple, as we all experience, food is a big thing. So when I first became a monk, you know, when you sort of take to a strict life of discipline, and you can't play video games anymore, you have to get up early, and so many things you can't do anymore. The only thing you can practically do is you can eat. You know? So it's amazing, like with junior monks, especially in the Krishna movement, it's astounding sometimes to see how much they're able to eat. It's quite impressive. I remember the first time I was at the temple, and there was this very skinny monk, and I saw he had like a plate of rice, which was like, I've never seen such a thing in my life. I was completely shocked. And but shortly after I moved into the temple, I was also eating that. Of course, that's like the only thing you have. So, but even if you eat, what happens if eating is wonderful, but then you have to digest everything, and that can sometimes be a little painful. And then there was this one senior monk, who was a senior monk, my mentor, and he would always eat very little. He had this little bowl, and he would only eat whatever he could fit into that bowl. So I was like, that was a very interesting program. So I asked him about it. I was like, you know, Prabhu, is that your little bowl? Is that all you eat? And he just looked at me and he said, the thing that you have to understand is that there is a difference between eating well and feeling well. You know? And I always remembered it. It was like, and you can say that for everything. There is a difference between feeling well, meaning taking your senses and giving them what they want, you know? And then the after effects are not that well. And the same thing when you experience your first hangover, then you realize that there is a difference between the day of the party and the next day. These two experiences are very different. But you cannot separate the one from the other, isn't it? You cannot separate the one from the other. Unless you are a helicopter pilot, which I heard that my dad told me that they were in the war, then they would get very drunk, and then they would steal the next day. They would take, because the helicopter pilots have like pure oxygen that they keep in their helicopters. And apparently that's an amazing antidote for a hangover, is you just take a shot of pure oxygen. So it's possible, for those of you who are inquiring, if you think about it, it's possible to skip a hangover, but not for long. Even if you skip the hangover, what happens if you keep drinking? You can get cirrhosis of the liver, so many things can happen to you. So there is no way in escaping that pleasure, if indulged in unrestrictedly, will lead to pain. 100%. It's like the two things, you cannot separate one from the other. So hedonism has those two problems. On the one hand, pleasure leads to pain, so your philosophy doesn't work, because you're looking for pleasure, you're looking for happiness, but then as a result you get pain. So that doesn't work. And on the other hand, it doesn't account for the fact that there are many, many meaningful things in life that come with suffering, that we oftentimes voluntarily embrace. So it means that obviously pleasure cannot be the highest thing, because there's so many things that for many people are more important than pleasure or pain. And oftentimes, these are the people that there's something inspiring to that, isn't it? When you see people who sacrifice their life for something great, there's something inspiring about that. I read about in the Second World War, there was this, a Polish officer, what's his name, Witold Pilecki, and he broke in. He basically got himself, he went on a secret mission, and he got caught, so that he could get sent to the concentration camps and get information about what's actually happening in the concentration camps, how many guards are there. And then he ended up breaking out of the concentration camp, and he volunteered for that mission. And he ended up doing so many different things, so many crazy missions that he went on. And at the end, the same thing was there. But at the end, when he got caught and executed, at the end, he had zero regret. And he said he would just, almost similar to what that other gentleman said, that his only regret is that he couldn't do more. Only regret is that he couldn't suffer more for what he held true, for what he thought was higher than personal happiness. So hedonism doesn't work. Okay? Now, the Bhagavad Gita is obviously deals a lot with the question of happiness, because the Bhagavad Gita's premise is that it's a soul that gets put into a situation where he cannot see the path to happiness anymore. Life puts him into a situation, he looks in front of him, he sees, if I go this way, I see no happiness. If I go this way, I see no happiness. I see nothing before, no path before me makes sense. So we all, at certain stages in our life, will have times like that. We will get into positions where we cannot see a clear way. And usually we can end up in conflicting priorities. And it can come in 1,000, 1,000,000 different varieties, where different things we might hold important, we might end up caught between them, and then we cannot see what are we supposed to do, what will make us happy. And spiritual vision, what the Bhagavad Gita is trying to teach us, is trying to say that there is always a way out. This is the one thing. There is always a way forward. If you have the eyes to see it, and you can be guided by spiritual wisdom, there is a path. There is never a situation in life where there is no way forward. Now, there sometimes could be ways where the path forward is going to be difficult, and that's a separate question. The path forward is not always going to be easy. The easy path generally is not necessarily the best path, and more oftentimes it is not. So there could be difficulty, 100%, but there's always a way. There's always a way forward that will bring us to happiness. But for that, we have to understand what happiness is. And the Bhagavad Gita is interesting because it gives us a scientific understanding of happiness. And what scientific means, it can mean a lot of different things, but in one sense, I use it in the way that it gives us a more nuanced understanding. By understanding that happiness there's different kinds of happiness, different categories of happiness. Okay? So a big portion of knowledge means that you understand more the specific details of it. Like if you think about someone who is an expert, okay? So if you're an expert on, I don't know, an expert on something. Give me an expert. What can people be an expert on?
Fuel additives.
On fuel additives, 100%.
Spies in Long Island.
Spies in Long Island. Okay, an expert in fuel additives is the easier one. An expert in fuel additives. What does an expert in fuel additives mean? It means that he understands the differences. He doesn't see that there's just fuel. He understands that there's so many different kinds of fuel. There's this kind of fuel, there's that kind of fuel, and he understands how these fuels are different from one another. For us, it's just fuel or oil. Like now with what's happening in the world, you read a little bit and you understand that it's not just oil, there's this kind of oil, and then there's the oil in Iran, and then there's the oil in America, and then there's that oil and that oil. And oil is not just oil. For an untrained person, oil is oil. It's just that thing, you somehow turn it into gas and you throw it in your car and there you go. But for an expert, they understand the differences between specific things. So when you try to understand happiness, you have to approach it a little scientifically and understanding that there is different kinds of happiness. There's different categories of happiness, and once you understand these different categories, life starts to make a lot more sense. You can start seeing much more that something that looks very simple has different kinds of categories, and even though they share similarities, they're very different. And the way that the Bhagavad Gita divides happiness up for us is it divides it in terms of the 3 modes of nature. Now, who is here has heard about the 3 modes of nature? A lot of you guys come regularly. So again, it's like we see in the Bhagavad Gita, it's a big topic. Big topic. So in short, it means that according to the vision of the Bhagavad Gita, the Vedic worldview, there's underlying everything in this world. There's 3 primordial modes, 3 kinds of beings. It's very similar to the 3 colors. So what are the 3 primary colors? It is red, yellow, blue. With those 3 colors, you can create an infinite amount of colors. You can mix them in different proportions and you can create an infinite spectrum of colors. But underlying it, there's only actually 3. There's just three different things. So similarly, when we look at this world, we see infinite variety, infinite amounts of people, infinite different kinds of animals, infinite kinds of landscapes, so many different things. But underlying everything, there's just actually three ingredients. Those three ingredients are what is called in Sanskrit sattva, raja, and tama, or means, if we translate it simply, it means truth or goodness, passion, and ignorance. Or if you think about the colors, there's yellow or white, there's red, and then there's blue or dark. Okay? And everything in this world, whether it's emotions, whether it is food, whether it is philosophies, so many different things. You can all understand in terms of these three modes. Now, tonight we're not going to get into the mode so much, but we're going to get into happiness. And in the 18th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna explains to us that even happiness comes in three different categories according to these modes. And that whether you pursue happiness in these different modes, you will get very, very different results. Even though we all share the common search for happiness, just like food is we all eat, and we all eat. And food is just, most food is what? It's sugar or protein or carbohydrates, protein or fat, okay? But there's a big difference between eating McDonald's every day or eating, like in Govinda's every day. Can I have a very different, it's food, but it's very different, Even the CEO of McDonald's understands that apparently, isn't it? If you see how, if you saw the ads with the guys trying to eat his own burger, and even they say, because then I saw another video where you see him eating like a kale salad somewhere. So it's fascinating, isn't it? He's selling the crap to everyone, but then he eats the kale salad. Similar to people who work in tech, people who work for Google, Facebook, how strict those people are with their own children. If you go to schools in Silicon Valley, super strict tech rules, because all those people who design social media, they know what really happens, so their own kids can't be exposed to it. Yeah. So what can we say? So happiness comes in these three modes, and I want to read about it quickly, because it's always nice to go to the Bhagavad Gita and see that in here, there's a lot of interesting things. And we always try to inspire people to go read for themselves. Let me see here quickly. Where is that? Okay. So Krishna says that, please hear from me about the three kinds of happiness by which the conditioned soul enjoys, and by which he sometimes comes to the end of all distress. Very interesting. That if you understand this, difference between different kinds of happiness, that is your first step towards the path of enlightenment. Because if you understand this, your vision of the world changes, and your life will change as well. Okay. So that which in the beginning, well, actually I'm going to go the other way around. I'm going to start at the bottom. Let's start with happiness in the mode of ignorance. Happiness which is blind to self-realization, which is delusion from beginning to end, and which arises from sleep, laziness, and illusion, is said to be of the nature of ignorance. Okay. Let's give some examples. What is those kinds of happiness? Happiness based on illusion and ignorance. Let's give some examples. Think about it. Netflix, good example. Yeah, why would you say it's like that?
Well, I guess it depends on what you're watching on Netflix, but if you're watching...
Most Netflix, yeah, I agree.
Most of Netflix, it's laziness. You don't have to use your intellectual capabilities at all. You can turn everything off.
Yeah, and again, what's the result? So you work Monday to Friday, and Saturday, you spend the whole day binging on Netflix. How do you feel after? Isn't it? You feel wonderful, ready to feeling that you're well rested to take on the no challenge. No, you just feel your mind is just more tired. You feel like more lazy, more like dull. Okay. What other examples are there of other kinds of happiness, quote unquote, in the mode of ignorance?
Smoking or drinking.
Smoking or drinking. Why?
Because they're sucking taking your life force and making you believe the illusion, finding happiness.
100%. It's a bit based on illusion. Like Prabhupada, our teacher, he would that people think by smoking they think that by inhaling hot smoke they can become cool. He said that's amazing. That doesn't make sense at all. How can you be cool by smoking? It doesn't make sense. So smoking example. And who's a smoker? I was a huge smoker. Anyone smoked for a while? So if you remember when you start smoking, the first time you start smoking a cigarette, how do you feel? The first cigarette?
Nauseous.
Nauseous. You feel horrible, isn't it? It's like, and I remember when I was initiated into the wonders of smoking, I had an older friend who then had to tell me, it's like, listen, you just gotta keep going. The first day you're gonna be nauseous. By the third or fourth day, you start feeling better. But what actually was interesting with smoking is that when people, also the percentage of people who have smoked for 10 years or longer, the vast majority of them would like to not smoke. Why do they keep smoking?
Addiction.
Because they don't smoke for the pleasure of smoking. They smoke because of the pain that happens when they don't smoke. It's like for them, like, I would love to stop smoking, but it's worse. I had a friend of mine, his father, was a very old guy, like one of those old grumpy golf champion. He was like our local golf guy. And he smoked probably for like 200 years, I'm sure. And then one day, my father met him. I was actually with my dad. We were at the store. And then we met him, and he looked bleak. Whew, he looked very bleak. And my dad spoke to him. My dad's like, you okay? What's happening? And he said, he just, a few days ago, he was coughing. He coughed out blood. He went to the doctor. The doctor told him, this is it. Like, if you smoke one more cigarette, that can be the end. You have to just immediately stop. There's no choice. It's like you can die immediately. If you don't stop now, it's over. So he had to just, after 40 years of smoking, 50 years of smoking, he had to immediately stop. He said that night he went home and he sat the whole night alone in his sitting room with the lights off, crying. He was just sitting there like crying because he wanted to smoke so bad. It was the most horrible. He just sat there the whole night. He was crying throughout the whole night. The pain, but he knew that if I smoke, I can die. He doesn't want to die. And I saw him. It looked like someone who's been awake for like 3 nights just crying. I was like, whoa, I'm glad I stopped smoking. And good example. So it's happiness. We do it because we think that somehow it will bring us happiness. I mean, why else are we going to do it? It costs so much money. But it doesn't really give happiness in the beginning. And it definitely doesn't really give happiness in the end. There's no real happiness there. Doesn't give health or pleasure or anything. But somehow we do it. Amazing. Very peculiar, the mode of ignorance. What else is there in the mode of ignorance? What else do people do?
A lot of regret.
A lot of regret, yeah? People do a lot of stuff with regret. Another darker example is who has heard of 716? I think it's 716. It's a cult. It's like a group of people. What they basically do is they find people on the internet, especially young people, and their goal is to convince these people to either kill themselves or to harm themselves and then to take photos of it, to share it online. So it's a group of people, and their motto is, it's like very strange, their motto is that we have felt, all we have known is pain, and that is all that we will give to the world. It's like their thing. So like kids who are either bullied or whatever, and then their response somehow is that, okay, now that's what the world is doing to us, this is what we'll do to other people. And what they do is they go on like chat groups, specifically they target groups like on Roblox or whatever the God knows is happening on the internet with kids who say they have mental health difficulties. And they find those kids and then they convince them. That's the goal of the whole thing. Group. And then you see how many people you can get. You can get kids to either cut themselves or kill themselves. That's the ultimate goal. So what is that? That is the mode of ignorance in an extreme extent. They somehow think that that brings happiness. They find some pleasure in that. And there's this video clip online where there's one guy, they convince him to set himself on fire. And then you hear the audio. They're all like, yeah, success, whatever, high five. We got this guy to put himself on fire. So The mode of ignorance is very peculiar, and you have to understand that if you let it go, it can take you to very strange places. It take you to very peculiar places where the natural sense, the natural human sensibilities or spiritual sensibilities become so perverted that it becomes almost unrecognizable. But the strange thing is that they still are looking for happiness. Isn't it amazing? That just like we look for happiness, they think that this is where we will find happiness. So ignorance, very, very strange. And for those who are practicing spiritual life, we practically have to try to avoid ignorance completely. As far as possible, you should try to see what you can do. Wherever ignorance, like darkness, is in your life, see what you can limit it completely. We'll speak a little bit now about passion. There's a place for passion, but ignorance is almost, you have to try to just completely avoid it. Stay away from it as far as possible. Okay, now let's go to passion. That happiness which is derived from contact of the senses with their objects, and which appear like nectar at first, but poison at the end, is said to be of the nature of passion. Okay. So, poison in the nectar in the beginning, but poison at the end. Some examples: happiness in the mode of passion.
Like an extreme workaholic.
Extreme workaholic.
Makes a lot of money,
Yeah.
but at the end,
What happens at the end?
cancer.
Cancer, ulcers of the stomach, like a total breakdown. No? Yeah, 100%. Like in the beginning, amazing, so much money. And at the end,
Depression.
yeah,
Depression.
100%. What else? Other examples?
Polyamorous.
Polyamorous relationships, 100%. Actually spoke to a therapist once. At some point I was thinking I might study mental health counseling, and then I spoke to a person, and I spoke to him, especially as a person with religious values, because I was looking for someone who's religious, but then also practicing as a psychologist. Like how do you, because those two values can oftentimes actually conflict quite a bit, like it's very secular discipline, and how do you combine the two? And then he told me that example. He said that actually there's some people that you just can't really help. And he said that especially so many times he's dealt with people in polyamorous relationships, and then they try to come to therapy to deal with the inevitable consequences that happen, like just the weird emotional and like things that can happen with them. And he's tried so many times, and now if he says my solution, my answer to you is you should not be in a polyamorous relationship, and if you want to, then I can't help you. I can't give you therapy. I have tried it. I can't help you, because his conviction is that it just causes so much difficulties that cannot be avoided. In terms, imagine envy and like so many weird things as a result. And also, just for children, it's a very strange dynamic to grow up in. Other examples of happiness in the mode of passion. Anyone else? Come.
Just being, winning the Olympics.
Winning the Olympics, good example. Do you know what happens after the Olympics? You heard about it? There's a specific term. I can't remember the specific term, but it is vast majority of Olympic athletes after the Olympics, they experience severe depression. Severe. It's like a real thing. Because you can imagine for so many years, it's like this is the only thing you're focusing on, and then after it's over. Like I don't know if you've ever spoken to people who are like, I had a friend who's a professional athlete, and the things athletes do, they can do the craziest stuff. Like he would only eat blended food, because like the thing is with a lot of the nutrition you get out of food, it depends on if it's very liquid, you can digest it much easier. So it's very troublesome to really chew your food properly. So what he would do is he would like make rice and vegetables, whatever his whole thing. So he'd make a meal, a plate, and then he would put it all in a blender, blend it up, and drink it, because that's how you get the most nutrition out of it. So extreme dedication. So imagine you're like this whole thing, like you do this crazy lifestyle, and then the Olympics happens, and then the day after the Olympics, it's over. Then people tumble. It's a big thing. They tumble. Most oftentimes they can tumble into severe depression, because now, okay, what was that for, and what happens now? Was it worth it? All these things that can go through your head. Yeah. So winning, And if you taking winning is a good example of that. It can be, if winning is your only goal in life, that's very passionate, and it might be nectar in the beginning, but it can be poison. It will be poison at the end, because it's not really the most important thing in life. You can't make it, if that becomes your highest priority, you will 100% have regrets in life. So the same thing with people like corporate, like career success means winning. Yeah? You're winning the rat race. But it's like, yeah, you win, but at what cost? You know? And you can see with certain occupations, if you look at also very intense occupations, like Delta Force, the people who are in Delta Force, like 95% of them are divorced. Like they're almost impossible for them to stay married because the lifestyle is just, it's crazy passionate. It's like,
You said the Delta Force?
Delta Force, like the high level tier 1 intelligence operators. Same people within the CIA, those people, they can't have a normal, you can't like be married because that becomes the number one thing. The mission is number one. Everything else is secondary. And there's only very few people who can live like that. That's why if they recruit people for the CIA, the specific psychological profile that they look for is people who have sociopathic tendencies. Not sociopaths, although sociopaths also do pretty good, but you have people who have a tendency to be sociopathic. Because those are the people that can just put the mission beyond anything else. Nothing else matters. Just that one thing. What to speak about the moral ambiguities and the consequences and the regret. There's not many people who can do that. So passion, intensity in general, everything that is extremely intense, that you can see that has that passionate energy. Because we see elsewhere in the Bhagavad Gita, it's explained that the mode of passion is characterized by an extreme attachment to specific results. You work extremely hard or you do specific things because you want something very specific to result from that. Okay? So that attitude is passion, and that attitude will cause problems for you. Because the reality in life is what? Life does not turn out exactly how you want it to turn out. There's not a single person on this planet whose life is exactly what they want it to be. This is impossible. No? Because we are not completely in control of what happens in our life. And that's not our role in life. So when you are working extremely hard for a very specific result, then you set yourself up for two things. You set yourself, if you work extremely hard and you're extremely attached to a specific result, then either one of two things happen. You get what you want and you experience the disappointment of it, or you don't get what you want and you experience the regret. That's it. Because the thing is, as we said, even if you get exactly what you want, it's not going to satisfy you. Huh? And we see it with something like money. You might think now, there's never a point, Mahabharata explains that greed, for example, is like a fire. And a fire can never be satisfied by pouring, they say ghee, but by pouring gas. If you pour gas onto a fire, you will never put out a fire. So similarly, greed, if you get more money, the greed is not satisfied. The greed actually just increases. It's the most amazing. Like me, myself, who's like not very wealthy, you sometimes have the idea, oh my God, if I just had so much money, I'd be so satisfied in life. Actually not. Because if you get that money, you will want more, isn't it? Amazing. That's just the reality. So that's why even the richest people in the world, they also would like more, because that's just the reality of how life goes. So the point is that greed cannot be satisfied by acquisition. Greed has to be curbed by something else entirely. Greed can be overcome, but not by making money. That's not how you solve greed. Greed is something that has to be dealt with something different. Okay, so that is the mode of passion. So intense desire for something based usually, as we said, on contact of the senses with their objects. And it is like nectar in the beginning, but poison at the end. In the purport, actually, the archetypical example of passion is the relationship between the sexes. The attraction that exists between the sexual attraction is because even if you think about passion, that's what passion means. That energy is the archetype. If not carefully dealt with, it will cause you so much suffering.
Like lust.
Lust, yeah. But just everything that comes with it. I mean, and you can speak. Well, like I said, that guy I met on the street, at some point he was madly in love with that lady. And then it turned to be the most horrible nightmare for him. And life is full of those examples. So, like we said, and it's a big lesson to learn in life. Just because you are in love with someone or extremely attracted to someone, it does not at all mean in any case that that person will make you happy. Not necessarily. They could, but it is not an indicator of it. You understand? Just because you're attracted to someone does not at all mean it's a good idea for you to pursue a relationship. It could be, the right person could also be someone to which you're attracted to, ideally, but just because there is attraction doesn't mean it's going to be good for you. The good example is, just because food tastes good does not at all mean it is good for you. This is simple. It's like the things that taste amazing, just because it tastes amazing does not at all mean it's going to have good results for you, okay? So that's passion, and the most archetypical example is in sexual relationships or romantic relationships. So when you choose a partner in life, there's tons of other things you have to take into consideration. It cannot just be attraction. If you will decide who to marry purely based on who you are most attracted to, the chances of you making the right decision is like astronomically low. It's very, very unlikely that you will make the correct decision in life because there's tons of other things you have to take into consideration. It cannot just be based on romance, because there's so many other things that have to be taken into consideration. So that is the nature of passion. Okay, now, goodness. That which in the beginning may be just like poison, but at the end is just like nectar, and which awakens one to self-realization, is said to be happiness in the mode of goodness. Okay, so we see how it's flipped. In passion, or in ignorance, it's poison in the beginning, poison at the end. The first cigarette you smoke is horrible, you feel nauseous. The last cigarette you smoke just before you die, there's no real pleasure there. In passion, in the beginning, nectar, amazing. First, whether it's money or sex or whatever it is, the initial experience is pleasurable. But the end, poison, severe regret, or all kinds of consequences. In goodness, turned around. In the beginning, it is poison. It's horrible. It feels so unpleasurable. It feels like you're doing the wrong thing. But the end result is nectar. Okay? Some examples. Happiness in the mode of goodness. Give me some examples of these kind of things. Exercise. Archetypical, isn't it? I remember when I was young, unfortunately, I didn't understand it. The first time I went to practice some sport, and they had us run laps around some place. I was just like a little nerdy computer kid. And I was like coughing, and I was like, this is ridiculous. This is like the most ridiculous thing ever. It made zero sense to me, And I didn't exercise for like 15 years. Later in life, I realized, well, actually exercise is pretty good. Like, you have to do it. I know, in the beginning, it sucks. You're coughing, your lungs are burning. It's like, doesn't make sense. Or even just, say, if you do yoga, the first time, so like exercise can be passion, but even something like yoga, if you're unflexible, the first time you stretch, God, it's so painful, isn't it? Like if your limbs are so stiff, it's so painful to stretch, it's so uncomfortable. But if you keep doing it, you get the results. You get strength, you get flexibility, you get cardiovascular health. So many good things come, but it comes at the end, not at the beginning. Okay? Some other examples of happiness in the mode of goodness. Meditation. How does it, when you regularly meditate?
Yeah.
Okay. What was your first experience of meditation like?
It's so hard to quiet the mind.
Isn't it?
The mind.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's so painful. Yeah.
Yeah.
I remember when I first started my meditation, I started with like 5 minutes and I would put a timer on my phone. And like at the end, you're just shaking and like the sweat is coming from your head. You're like, God, this is so difficult. Yeah. So poison in the beginning, the monkey mind. What else? Yes.
Time management and budgeting.
Yes, budgeting. Oh my God, isn't it?
Time management.
Time management. And it's good you put them together because they're so similar. Because restriction is poison. Like, we hate it, isn't it? We hate restriction. Budgeting and time management is 90% just restriction. It's like the basis of successful budgeting and the basis of successful time management is firstly in avoiding waste. If you can, the most important thing with budgeting is kicking out all the waste. So all the things you spend your money on, which is useless, but it is painful.
Being resourceful.
Yeah, it's a painful thing to now restrict yourself. So same thing with, like you said, so financial and time management, same thing, time. To stop procrastinating, it is extremely painful. It's like, it's like very painful. But, do you regularly budget? I'm assuming you must regularly budget and manage your time because you speak from realization.
I learned along the way.
Yeah.
I became better at it, and my vision helps me to budget better as well, and that helped me to understand investing.
Yeah.
So I'm like really interested in investing. That's why budgeting is like priority for me.
Yes, good to bring in investment because investment is also exactly that. It's like you forego spending that money now, but at the end there is nectar, isn't it? When your investments grow, yes.
I think the whole idea is acceptance, really, at the
Mhm.
fundamental level. You accept your lot in life instead of trying to, all these vices are trying to escape.
Yes.
Pleasure.
Yeah.
Escaping, you can't face up to the dynamics
Yeah.
of this wonderful experience.
Yeah.
You'll never get there as long as you stray into pleasures and different things that are destructive, actually.
Yeah.
But actually, this is universal.
Hmm.
It's not just in Krishna.
Yes.
As you know,
Yeah,
that's
yeah,
one of the things.
100%.
I know.
Yeah.
So I know you will be in that context.
Yeah.
But the truth is, it's universal to such an extent.
Yeah.
Let's take Sisyphus.
Yeah.
He spends his life rolling a rock up a hill,
Yeah.
but he never complains. And when it comes to the top of the hill, he experiences a bliss.
Yeah.
That is really what we all want, a reward of spiritual redemption,
Yeah.
enlightenment. But then the rock rolls back down the hill.
Exactly.
He goes immediately back because the incentives,
Yeah.
he's tasted of the truth,
Yeah.
the real beauty of life experience is about. He never complains, he starts immediately rolling the rock up the hill again.
Yeah.
Most modern man wouldn't understand that.
Yeah.
It would be fruitless.
Yeah.
But the Greek myth portrays it clearly.
Yeah.
And then you have the teachings of the Buddhists.
Yeah.
The first saying is, all of life is sorrow.
Yes.
That sounds pessimistic. You see, there you have it again.
Yeah.
You want to escape the sorrow. There's no escaping loss,
Yeah.
death. How can you escape that? So you have to accept. The whole thing's based on acceptance.
Yes.
And then you move on from there
Yeah.
into the greatest prize of all, the greatest reward of all, which is spiritual enlightenment.
Yes.
Nothing to top that.
Definitely.
But people can't really conceive of it. So they go into all these things that we talk about all the time.
Yeah.
Oh, sex, pleasure, drugs, alcohol,
Yeah.
and all the shortcomings. Because first you have to have the conception. The modern man has lost that. In a tribal level, the
Yeah.
irony is on tribal levels, you have more of a chance of experiencing the so-called primitive man.
Yeah.
Because he functions under the dictates of nature.
Yes.
Nature is God.
No, 100%. No, and we see also that in the mode of, in the, in the mode of, in the natural way of life, it's great you brought that in, is that it is a challenge for us because unfortunately our environment and our society now is much more permeated by ignorance and passion. So in the modern world, we all have to make a very specific program. You have to have a very conscious decision to try to cultivate the mode of goodness. See where you can bring it in. Because it's not going to happen naturally. Just like you said, a good example is something like sleep. Like for us now, to go to sleep is a big struggle. Because we live in a very artificial world where everything is lighted up and you have all devices, and it causes so much problems for us. So difficulties come because we don't sleep properly. But so you have to now make a personal program. You have to really restrict yourself, be careful what you do in life because the environment is not natural anymore. So in the mode of goodness, we see here that poison in the beginning, nectar in the end. And then I would like to end off with a final verse, important, just like the gentleman also explained to us, is that we have to understand that this is just now on the material platform. But the Bhagavad Gita also explains that as we start to cultivate this mode of goodness, and we fill our life by basically embracing, accepting the reality that long-term gain is more important, and we can see that so much of the good things in life in the beginning are difficult, and later the results only come. We can accept that fact. So many things open up to us in life. And then we can get in our material life a certain kind of stability. But the best thing to do with that is then to cultivate spiritual realization. And therefore, I want to end off with another verse which explains that. See here. Okay, this is from the 5th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, where Krishna says, "One whose happiness is within, who is active and rejoices within, and whose aim is inward, is actually the perfect mystic. He is liberated in the Supreme, and ultimately he attains the Supreme." So we see that there is an intimate connection between cultivating happiness in the mode of goodness and then making that jump towards spiritual life. And the more we can mold our life and associate with the mode of goodness, the more life becomes peaceful, the mind becomes peaceful, we become more satisfied, we stop chasing and wasting our energy in things that will ultimately just lead to poison. And as you shape your life in this way, all these spiritual disciplines become much easier, much, much easier. But we have to understand that ultimately, happiness, the real happiness that we're looking for, is spiritual happiness. There is no material experience that can bring satisfaction to the soul. And spiritual enlightenment, we see, comes from making that mystical connection with God. That connection with God is what ultimately brings us deep happiness. And that is what, when we start, as we said in the beginning, we're looking at happiness. So 4 kinds of happiness. Happiness in ignorance, happiness in passion, happiness in goodness, and then that jump can be made. Happiness, spiritual happiness, which comes when we make that connection with God. Okay? So very nice. So the Bhagavad Gita takes something very complicated, puts it out, and if you now look at your life, you'll see if you're equipped with those different concepts, you'll be able to identify things much more clearly. And when you start thinking about how you spend your time and the things you pursue in life, you can really ask yourself, where does this fall in the spectrum? And then you can see for yourself, once you know that it falls in one of these categories, now you also know what will be the consequence. Either it will be nectar or it will be poison. So I think we can end here. Question stuff in between. Thank you very much. It was lovely to be here with you, and we'll do a little prayer time.
So thank you, Hari Vilas Prabhu.